Scene script. Have you ever wondered why New York City, one of the world's most iconic cities, is facing a housing crisis? The roots of New York City's housing shortage are deep-seated, tangled in a web of historical and socio-political factors. One of the key contributors to this crisis is exclusionary zoning practices. These were policies that, rooted in racial bias, placed restrictions on where certain types of housing could be built, effectively limiting the supply of affordable homes. And it's not just these antiquated policies that have created this shortage. Restrictive zoning regulations continue to stifle the availability of housing in the city. These rules limit the types and sizes of buildings that can be constructed in certain areas, preventing the development of high-density housing that could accommodate more people. As if the problem wasn't complex enough, the decline in public housing stock has only exacerbated the issue. Over the years, New York City's public housing has fallen into disrepair, leaving even fewer options for those in need of affordable homes. But it's not just about supply. Demand plays a huge part too. From 1950 to 2000, New York City's population declined, but recent years have seen a resurgence in the allure of city living. This has led to a boom in housing demand, but unfortunately, housing construction has not been able to keep pace. In fact, an analysis of building records reveals that the city has lost over 100,000 apartments since 1950. This loss is due to factors such as apartment combinations and the conversion of multi-unit buildings into single-family homes. Despite an overall increase in the number of apartments in the city, the rate of new construction has been insufficient to meet the growing population's housing needs. The cost of housing production has also skyrocketed due to land use regulation, historical preservation, and political opposition. This has resulted in a chronic housing shortage, with the cost burden impacting the poor and working class the most. As we've seen, the housing crisis in New York City didn't emerge overnight. It's a complex issue rooted in decades of policy and social changes. So, what does this housing crisis mean for the people of New York? Well, let's start with the most obvious impact: the escalating rents and housing prices. With the shortage of homes in New York City now estimated to be nearly 340,000, the cost of housing has skyrocketed. This surge in prices is not just a burden for the affluent, it's a crushing weight on the shoulders of the poor and working class who are struggling to make ends meet. The soaring rents have hit the poor and working class the hardest. Many have to spend a disproportionate amount of their income on housing. This leaves them with less money for other basic needs like food, healthcare, and education. The situation is especially dire for those on minimum wage jobs or with unstable employment. They live in constant fear of eviction and homelessness. Overcrowding is another significant issue that stems from the housing crisis. With the growing population and demand for housing, many are forced to squeeze into small apartments. Families often have to share rooms and, in some cases, even beds. This lack of personal space and privacy can lead to tension and conflicts, affecting people's mental and emotional well-being. Homelessness, a grim reality of the housing crisis, is also on the rise. With rents outpacing incomes, more and more people are finding themselves without a roof over their heads. The city's public housing stock, which could have provided some relief, has fallen into disrepair, further exacerbating the problem. The housing crisis isn't just about the lack of homes or high rents. It's about the human toll it takes on the people of New York. It's about families being torn apart because they can't afford a place to live. It's about children growing up in overcrowded homes, their childhood overshadowed by the constant stress of instability. Clearly, the housing crisis is more than just a numbers game. It's a human issue, affecting thousands of New Yorkers every day. Over the years, various attempts have been made to address the housing crisis. Some have been successful, while others have fallen short. One such endeavor was spearheaded by Mayor Bill de Blasio, who introduced an ambitious plan to build and preserve affordable housing units. This initiative was seen as a beacon of hope for many, a promise of secure and affordable homes for countless New Yorkers. However, as time passed, it became evident that the goals set by the administration were not being met. The grand vision gradually faded, leaving behind the harsh reality of a plan that had failed to materialize. Another significant factor contributing to the housing crisis is the loss of over 100,000 apartments since 1950. This is largely due to apartment combinations and conversions of multi-unit buildings into single-family homes. What was once a thriving community of diverse households has been transformed into isolated islands of single dwellings. This trend has not only reduced the number of available units but has also driven up the cost of living, making it more difficult for average New Yorkers to find affordable housing. The housing crisis is not a single issue, but rather a complex web of interconnected problems. These range from high rents and overcrowding to restrictive zoning regulations and political opposition. The cost of housing production has also increased due to factors such as land use regulation, historical preservation, and political opposition. These challenges have only served to exacerbate the housing shortage. Despite the numerous efforts made to address these issues, the city's public housing stock has continued to fall into disrepair, further exacerbating the housing shortage. A combination of exclusionary zoning practices rooted in racism, restrictive zoning regulations that limit housing supply, and a lack of political will to implement necessary reforms have all contributed to the ongoing crisis. Despite the best intentions, these efforts have been unable to fully tackle the enormity of the housing crisis. The journey to resolve New York's housing crisis is a long and difficult one, fraught with obstacles and setbacks. But with each step taken, with each failure and success, we move closer to understanding the true extent of the problem and the solutions needed to finally bring about change. But there's a new plan on the horizon, one that promises to make a difference. Enter Mayor Eric Adams with his fresh and ambitious blueprint to address New York City's housing shortage, making the city more affordable for all. The cornerstone of his strategy, a significant alteration to the city's zoning code. This shift in regulation, according to Adams, aims to pave the way for the creation of around 100,000 additional homes over the next 15 years. This, in theory, sounds like a substantial solution. However, not everyone is convinced. A number of experts have voiced their skepticism, questioning whether this plan will be enough to bring down rents or home prices. They argue that the New York City metropolitan area is estimated to be short nearly 340,000 homes. So even with an extra 100,000 homes in the pipeline, the city would still be falling short by a considerable margin. Yet, while the numbers might not appear to add up at first glance, it's important to remember that this is one of the largest local efforts to address the housing shortage. The sheer scale of the project could have significant ripple effects across the city. The plan is not without its critics. There are those who argue that it is too ambitious, that it overestimates what can realistically be achieved within such a constrained time frame. Others question whether the plan goes far enough, pointing to the ongoing housing shortage as evidence that more radical action is needed. But despite these critiques, Mayor Adams is pushing forward with his vision. His plan, while ambitious, represents a significant step in the right direction, a tangible attempt to address a pressing issue that has plagued New York City for decades. While the plan is ambitious, only time will tell if it can truly address the housing crisis in New York City. So, what's next for New York City's housing crisis? As we move forward, there are several proposals on the table that could shape the future of housing in the city. The New York State Legislature, currently dominated by socialist legislators, is considering measures that could drastically alter the housing landscape. Among these are punitive rent controls and requirements for below-market rents in new apartment buildings. While these measures may seem appealing in their promise to immediately lower costs for tenants, they also risk discouraging new construction, which could further exacerbate the housing shortage. Meanwhile, Governor Kathy Hochul is taking a different approach. After previous proposals for zoning reform fell flat, the governor is now suggesting a more pragmatic path forward. This includes supporting Mayor Eric Adams' zoning reform plan, which aims to create around 100,000 additional homes over the next 15 years. Another significant proposal from the governor's office is the reinstatement of the Section 421, a tax exemption for affordable housing units. This exemption, which was previously a key incentive for developers to build affordable housing, could potentially stimulate the construction of new units and help to alleviate the housing shortage. However, the governor's proposals are not without their critics. Some have raised concerns about labor requirements for tax incentives, arguing that these requirements could increase the cost of housing production and make it more difficult to address the housing shortage. There's no denying that the road ahead is fraught with challenges. But as we look towards the future, it's important to remember that solving the housing crisis will not be a quick or easy task. It will require innovative solutions, strong leadership, and a commitment to making New York City a home for everyone. Only by working together and embracing new ideas can we hope to build a city where everyone has a place to call home. As we look to the future, it's clear that solving the housing crisis will require innovative solutions, strong leadership, and a commitment to making New York City a home for everyone.